Are you ready to fall asleep? Now close your eyes to get started. Let's slow down your breathing first. Breathe in through your nose. Breathe out through your mouth. Again. Breathe in. Breathe out. One more time. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now let's keep a nice, slow breath while I read you this story. The Frog King, or Iron Henry. In old times, when wishing was having, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful. But the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which hasn't seen much, was astonished whenever it shone in her face. Close by the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and under an old lime tree in the forest was a fountain. When the day was very warm, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of the cool fountain. And when she was dull, she took a golden ball and threw it up in the air and caught it. And this ball was her favorite plaything. Now, it so happened one day, the king's daughter's golden ball did not fall into the little hand which she was holding up for it, but to the ground, and rolled straight into the water. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes, but it vanished, and the well was so deep that the bottom could not be seen. On this, she began to cry, and cried louder and louder, and could not be comforted. And as she thus lamented, someone said to her, "What ails you, king's daughter? You weep so that even a stone would show pity." She looked round to the side whence the voice came, and saw a frog stretching its thick, ugly head from the water. "Ah, old water splasher, is it you?" And she, "I'm weeping for my golden ball, which has fallen into the fountain." "Be quiet and do not weep," answered the frog. "I can help you. But what will you give me if I bring your plaything up again?" "Whatever you will have, dear frog," said she. "My clothes, my pearls, and jewels, and even the golden crown which I am wearing." The frog answered, "I do not care for your clothes, your pearls, and jewels, or even your golden crown. But if you will love me, and let me be your companion and playfellow, and sit by you at your little table, and eat off your little golden plate, and drink out of your little cup, and sleep in your little bed, if you will promise me this, I will go down below and bring up your golden ball again." "Oh yes," said she, "I promise you all you wish, if you will but bring my ball back again." She, however, thought, "How the silly frog does talk. He lives in the water with the other frogs and croaks, and can be no companion to any human being. But the frog, when he had received this promise, put his head into the water and sank down. In a short time, he came swimming up again with the ball in his mouth and threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was delighted to see her plaything once more, and picked it up and ran away with it. "Wait, wait," said the frog. "Take me with you. I can't run as you can." But what did it avail him to scream his croak, croak, after her as loudly as he could? She did not listen to it, but ran home and soon forgot the poor frog, who was forced to go back into his fountain again. The next day, when she had seated herself at the table with the king and all of the courtiers, and was eating from her little golden plate, something came creeping, splish, splash, splish, splash, up the marble staircase. When it got to the top, it knocked at the door and cried, "King's daughter, youngest, open the door." She ran to see who was outside, but when she opened the door, there sat the frog in front of it. Then she slammed the door in great haste, sat down to dinner again, and was quite frightened. The king saw plainly that her heart was beating violently, and said, "My child, what are you so afraid of? Is there a giant outside who wants to carry you away?" "Ah, no," she replied. "It is no giant, but a disgusting frog." "What does the frog want with you?" "Ah, dear father, yesterday when I was sitting in the forest by the fountain, playing, my golden ball fell into the water, and because I cried so, the frog brought it out for me. And because he insisted so on it, I promised him he should be my companion. But I never thought he would be able to come out of the water. And now he is here and wants to come in." In the meantime, it knocked a second time and cried, "King's daughter, youngest, open to me. Don't you remember yesterday, and all that you to me did say, beside the cooling fountain spray? King's daughter, youngest, open to me." Then the king said, "That which you have promised you must perform. Go and let him in." She went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in and followed her, step by step, to her chair. There he sat, still, and cried, "Lift me up beside you." She delayed until at last the king commanded her to do it. When the frog was once on the chair, he wanted to be on the table. And when he was on the table, he said, "Now push your little golden plate nearer to me, that we may eat together." She did this, but it was easy to see that she did not do it willingly. The frog enjoyed what he ate, but almost every mouthful she took choked her. At length he said, "I have eaten and am satisfied. Now I am tired. carry me into your little room and make your little silken bed ready, and we will both lie down and go to sleep." The king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog, which she did not like to touch, and which was now to sleep in her pretty, clean little bed. But the king grew angry and said, "He who helped you when you were in trouble ought not afterward to be despised." So she took hold of the frog with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs, and put him in a corner. But she was in the bed. He crept to her and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well as you. Lift me up, or I will tell your father." Then she was terribly angry, and took him up and threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now you be quiet, odious frog," she said. But when he fell down, he was no frog, but a king's son with beautiful, kind eyes. He, by her father's will, was now her dear companion and husband. Then he told her how he had been bewitched by a wicked witch, and how no one could have delivered him from the fountain but herself, and that tomorrow they would go together into his kingdom. Then they went to sleep, and next morning, when the sun awoke them, a coach came rolling up, drawn by 8 white horses, with white ostrich feathers on their heads. They were harnessed by golden chains, and behind stood the young king's servant, Faithful Henry. Faithful Henry had been so unhappy when his master was changed into a frog that he had 3 iron bands laid round his heart, lest it should burst with grief and sadness. The coach was to conduct the young king into his kingdom. Faithful Henry helped them both in, and placed himself behind again, and was full of joy because of this deliverance. And when they had driven a part of the way, the king's son heard a cracking behind him, as if something had broken. So he turned round and cried, "Henry, the coach does break." "No, no, my lord, you do mistake. It is the band around my heart that felt such great and bitter smart when you were in the fountain strange, when you into a frog were changed." Again and once again, while they were on their way, something cracked, and each time the king's son thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the bands which were springing from the heart of Faithful Henry, because his master was set free and was happy. Are you still awake? That's okay. Close your eyes, keep them closed, and let's breathe again. So breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. Again, breathe in, breathe out. One more time. Breathe in, breathe out. Now just keep that nice, slow breath while I read you another story. The Wolf and the 7 Little Kids. There once on a time an old goat who had 7 little kids, and loved them with all the love of a mother for her children. One day, she wanted to go into the forest and fetch some food. So she called all 7 to her and said, "Dear children, I have to go into the forest. Be on your guard against the wolf. If he come in, he will devour you all, skin, hair, and all. The wretch often disguises himself, but you will know him at once by his rough voice and his black feet." The kids said, "Dear mother, we will take good care of ourselves. You may go away without any anxiety." Then the one bleated and went on her way with an easy mind. It was not long before someone knocked on the house door and cried, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the little kids knew that it was the wolf by his rough voice. "We will not open the door," cried they. "You are not our mother. She has a soft, pleasant voice, but your voice is rough. You are the wolf." Then the wolf went away to a shopkeeper and bought a great lump of chalk, ate this, and made his voice soft with it. Then he came back, knocked at the door of the house, and cried, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the wolf had laid his black paws against the window, and the children saw them and cried, "We will not open the door. A mother has not black feet like you. You are the wolf." Then the wolf ran to the baker and said, "I have hurt my feet. Rub some dough over them for me." And when the baker had rubbed his feet over, he ran to the miller and said, "Strew some white meal over my feet for me." The miller thought to himself, "The wolf wants to deceive someone," and refused. But the wolf said, "If you will not do it, I will devour you." Then the miller was afraid and made his paws white for him. Yes, so are men. Now the wretch went for the 3rd time to the house door, knocked at it, and said, "Open the door for me, children. Your dear mother has come home and has brought every one of you from the forest with her." The little kids cried, "First, show us your paws that we may know if you are a dear little mother." He put his paws in through the window, and when the kids saw that they were white, they believed all that he said and opened the door. But who should come in but the wolf? They were terrified and wanted to hide themselves. One sprang under the table, the second into the bed, the third into the stove, the fourth into the kitchen, the fifth into the cupboard, the sixth under the washing bowl, and the 7th into the clock case. But the wolf found them all and made no delay, but swallowed one after other down his throat. The youngest in the clock case was the only one he did not find. When the wolf had satisfied his appetite, he took himself off, laid himself under a tree in the green meadow outside, and began to sleep. Soon after, the goat came home again from the forest. Ah, what a sight she saw there! The house door stood wide open. The tables and chairs and benches were thrown down. The washing bowl lay broken to pieces, and the quilts and pillows were pulled off the bed. She sought her children, but they were nowhere to be found. She called them one after another by name, but no one answered. At last she called the youngest. A soft voice cried, "Dear mother, I am in the clock case." She took the kid out and told her that the wolf had come and eaten all the others. Then you may imagine how she wept over her poor children. At length, in her grief, she went out, and the youngest kid ran to her. When they came to the meadow, there lay the wolf by the tree, and he was snoring so loud that the branches shook. She looked at him on every side and saw that something was moving and struggling in his stomach. "Ah," she said, "is it possible that my poor children, whom he has swallowed down for supper, can still be alive?" Then the kid had to run home and fetch scissors and a needle and thread, and the goat cut open the monster's stomach. Hardly had she made one cut, then the kid thrusted its head off, and when she cut further, all 6 sprang out one after another, and were all still alive, and had suffered no hurt whatever, for in his greediness the monster swallowed them whole. What rejoicing there was! They embraced their dear mother, and jumped like a tailor at his wedding. The mother, however, said, "Now go and look for some big stones. We will fill the wicked beast's stomach with them while he's asleep." Then the 7 kids dragged the stones thither with all speed, and put as many of them into his stomach as they could get in. And their mother sewed him up again in the greatest haste, so that he was not aware of anything, and never once stirred. When the wolf had had his sleep out, he got on his legs, and as the stones in the stomach made him very thirsty, he wanted to go to a well to drink. But when he began to walk and to move about, the stones in his stomach knocked against each other and rattled. Then he cried, "What rumbles and tumbles against my poor bones? I thought 'twas 6 kids, but it's only big stones." And when he got to the well and stooped over the water and was just about to drink, the heavy stones made him fall in. There was no help for it, but he had to drown miserably. When the 7 kids saw that, they came running to the spot and cried aloud, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" and danced for joy round the well with their mother. Are you still with me? Don't worry. Keep your eyes closed. Breathe in. Breathe out. And stick around with me for another story. Little Brother and Little Sister. Little brother took his little sister by the hand and said, "Since our mother died, we have had no happiness. Our stepmother beats us every day, and if we come near her, she kicks us away with her foot. Our meals are the hard crusts of bread that are left over. The little dog under the table is better off, for she often throws it a bit nice. May heaven pity us, if our mother only knew. Come, we will go forth together into the wild world." They walked the whole day over meadows, fields, and stony places, and when it rained, the little sister said, "Heaven and our hearts are weeping together. In the evening, they came to a large forest, and they were so weary with sorrow and hunger and the long walk that they lay down in a hollow tree and fell asleep. The next day, when they awoke, the sun was already high and shone down hot into the tree. Then the little brother said, "Little sister, I am thirsty. If I knew of a little brook, I would go and take a drink. I hear one running." The little brother got up and took the little sister by the hand, and they set off to find the brook. But the wicked stepmother was a witch, and had seen how the children gotten away. She had crept after them, as witches do creep, and had bewitched all the brooks in the forest. Now, when they found the little brook leaping brightly over the stones, the little brother was going to drink out of it. But the little sister heard how it said as it ran, "Who drinks of me? A tiger be. Who drinks of me? A tiger be." Then the little sister cried, "Pray, dear little brother, do not drink, or you will become a wild beast and tear me to pieces." The little brother did not drink, although he was thirsty, but said, "I will wait for the next spring." But when they came to the brook, the little sister heard this say, "Who drinks of me? A wild wolf be. Who drinks of me? A wild wolf be." Then the little sister cried out, "Pray, dear little brother, do not drink, or you will become a wolf and devour me." The little brother did not drink and said, "I will wait until we come to the next spring, but then I must drink. Say what you like, for my thirst is too great." And when they came to the third brook, the little sister heard how it said as it ran, "Who drinks of me? A roebuck be. Who drinks of me? A roebuck be." The little sister said, "Oh, I pray you, dear little brother, do not drink, or you will become a roe and run away from me." But the little brother had knelt by the brook, had bent down and drunk some of the water, and as soon as the first drops touched his lips, he lay there, a young roe. And now the little sister wept over her poor bewitched little brother, and the little roe wept also, and sat sorrowfully near her. But at last the girl said, "Be quiet, dear little roe, I will never, never leave you." Then she untied her golden garter and put it around the roe's neck, and she plucked rushes and wove them into a soft cord. With this, she tied the little animal and led it on, and she walked deeper and deeper into the forest. And when they had gone a very long way, they came to a tiny little house. The girl looked in, and as it was empty, she thought, "We could stay here and live." Then she sought for leaves and moss to make a soft bed for the roe. Every morning she went out and gathered roots and berries and nuts for herself, and brought tender grass for the roe, who ate it out of her hand, and was content, and played around about her. In the evening, when the little sister was tired, and had said her prayer, she laid her head onto the roe's back. That was her pillow, and she slept softly on it. And if only the little brother had his human form, it would be a delightful life. For some time, they were alone like this in the wilderness. But it happened that the king of the country had held a great hunt in the forest. Then the horns blasted. The barking of dogs and the merry shouts of the huntsmen rang through the trees, and the roe heard it all and was only too anxious to be there. "Oh," he said to his little sister, "let me be off to the hunt. I can't bear it any longer." And he begged so much, at last she agreed. "But," she said to him, "come back to me in the evening. I must shut my door for fear of the rough huntsman. So knock and say, 'My little sister, let me in, that I may know you.' And if you do not say it, I shall not open the door." Then the young roe sprang away. So happy was he, so merry in the open air. The king and the huntsman saw the pretty creature and started after him. But they could not catch him. And when they thought that they surely had him, away he sprang through the bushes and was gone. When it was dark, he ran to the cottage, knocked, and said, "Little sister, let me in." Then the door was opened for him. He jumped in and rested himself the whole night through upon his soft bed. The next day, the hunt went on afresh, and when the roe again heard the bugle horn and the ho-ho of the huntsman, he had no peace, but said, "Sister, let me out, I must be off." His sister opened the door for him and said, "But you must be here again in the evening and say your password." When the king and his huntsman again saw the young roe with his golden collar, they all chased him. But he was too quick and nimble for them. This went on for the whole day, but by the evening the huntsmen had surrounded him, and one of them wounded him a little in the foot, so that he limped and ran slowly. Then a hunter crept after him to the cottage and heard how he said, "My little sister, let me in," and saw that door was opened for him and was shut again at once. The huntsman took notice of it all, and went to the king and told him what he had seen and heard. "Tomorrow we will hunt once more." The little sister, however, was dreadfully frightened when she saw that her little roe was hurt. She washed the blood off him, laid herbs on the wound, and said, "Go to your bed, dear roe, that you may get well again." But the wound was so slight that the roe next morning did not feel it any more. And when he again heard the sport outside, he said, "I cannot bear it, I must be there. They shall not find it so easy to catch me." The little sister cried and said, "This time they will kill you. And here I am alone in the forest, forsaken by all the world. I will not let you out." "Then you will have me die of grief," answered the roe. "When I hear the bugle horns, I feel as if I must jump out of my skin." Then the little sister could not do otherwise, but opened the door for him with a heavy heart. And the roe, full of health and joy, bounded away into the forest. When the king saw him, he said to his huntsman, "Now chase him all day long until nightfall, but take care that no one does him any harm." As soon as the sun had set, the king said to the huntsman, "Now come and show me the cottage in the wood." And when he was at the door, he knocked and called out, "Dear little sister, let me in." Then the door opened, and the king walked in, and there stood a maiden more lovely than he had ever seen. The maiden was frightened when she saw, not her little roe, but with a man with a golden crown upon his head. But the king looked kindly at her, stretched out his hand, and said, "Will you go with me to my palace and be my dear wife?" "Yes, indeed," answered the maiden, "but the little roe must go with me. I cannot leave him." The king said, "He shall stay with you as long as you live, and shall want nothing." Just then he came running in, and the little sister again tied him to the cord of rushes, took it in her own hand, and went away with the king from the cottage. The king took the lovely maiden upon his horse and carried her to his palace, where the wedding was held with great pomp. She was now the queen, and they lived for a long time happily together. The roe was tended and cherished, and ran about in the palace garden. But the wicked witch, because of whom the children had gone out into the world, thought all the time that the little sister had been torn to pieces by the wild beasts in the woods, and that the little brother had been shot for a roe by the huntsman. Now when she heard that they were so happy, so well off, envy with hatred rose in her heart and left her no peace, and she thought of nothing but how to bring them again to misfortune. Her daughter, whom was as ugly as night and had only one eye, grumbled at her and said, "A queen, that ought to have been my luck." "Only be quiet," answered the old woman, and comforted her by saying, "When the time comes, I shall be ready." As time went on, the queen had a little pretty boy. It happened that the king was out hunting, so the old witch took the form of a chambermaid, went into the room where the queen lay, and said to her, "Come, the bath is ready. It will do you good and give you fresh strength. Make haste before it gets cold." The daughter also was close by, so they carried the weak queen into the bathroom and put her into the bath. Then they shut the door and ran away. But in the bathroom they had to make a fire of such deadly heat that the beautiful young queen was soon suffocated. When this was done, the old woman took her daughter, put a nightcap on her head, and laid her in bed in place of the queen. She gave her too the shape and look of the queen. She could not make good the lost eye. In the evening, when he came home and heard that he had a son, he was heartily glad, and was going to the bed of his dear wife to see how she was. But the old woman called out, "For your life leave the curtains closed. The queen ought not to see the light yet, and must have rest." The king went away, and did not find out that a false queen was lying in the bed. But at midnight, when all slept, the nurse, who was sitting in the nursery by the cradle, and who was the only person awake, saw the door open and the true queen walked in. She took the child out of the cradle and laid it on her arm and nursed it. Then she shook up its pillow, laid the child down again, and covered it with the little quilt. And she did not forget the roe, but went into the corner where he laid, and stroked his back. Then she was quite silently out of the door again. The next morning, the nurse asked the guards whether anyone had come into the palace during the night, but they answered, "No, we have seen no one." She came thus many nights, and never spoke a word. The nurse always saw her, but she did not dare to tell anybody about it. When some time had passed in this manner, the queen began to speak in the night, and said, "How fares my child? How fares my roe? Twice shall I come, then never mo." The nurse did not answer, but when the queen had gone again, went to the king and told him all. The king said, "Ah, heavens! What is this? Tomorrow night I will watch by the child." In the evening he went into the nursery, And at midnight the queen again appeared and said, "How fares my child? How fares my roe? Once shall I come, then never mo." And she nursed the child as she wont to do before she disappeared. The king dared not speak to her. But on the next night he watched again. Then she said, "How fares my child? How fares my roe? This time I come, then never mo." At that, the king could not restrain himself. He sprang towards her and said, "You can be none other than my dear wife." She answered, "Yes, I am your dear wife." And at the same moment she received life again, and by God's grace became fresh, rosy, and full of health. Then she told the king the evil deed which the wicked witch and her daughter had been guilty of toward her. The king ordered both to be led before the jungle, and judgment was delivered against them. The daughter was taken into the forest, where she was torn to pieces by wild beasts, but the witch was cast into the fire and miserably burnt. And as soon as she was burnt, the roe changed the shape and received its human form again. So the little sister and the little brother lived happily together all their lives. I'm still here. Are you with me? Close your eyes. Keep them closed. Let's breathe again. Breathe in. Breathe out. And stay with me as I read you another story. The Fisherman and His Wife. There once upon a time a fisherman who lived with his wife in a miserable hovel close to the sea, and every day he went out fishing. And once, as he was sitting with his rod, looking at the clear water, his line suddenly went down, far down below, and when he drew it up again, he brought out a large flounder. Then the flounder said to him, "Hark, you fisherman, I pray you, let me live. I am no flounder, really, but an enchanted prince. What good will it do you to kill me? I should not be good to eat. Put me in the water again, and let me go." "Come," said the fisherman, "there is no need for so many words about it. A fish that can talk I should certainly let go, anyhow." With that, he put him back again into the clear water, and the flounder went to the bottom, leaving a long streak of blood behind him. Then the fisherman got up and went home to his wife in the hovel. "Husband," said the woman, "have you caught nothing today?" "No," said the man, "I did catch a flounder who said he was an enchanted prince, so I let him go again." "Did you not wish for anything first?" said the woman. "No," said the man. "What should I wish for?" "Ah," said the woman, "it is surely hard to have lived always in this dirty hovel. You might have wished for a small cottage for us. Go back and call him. Tell him we want a small cottage. He will certainly give us that." "Ah," said the man, "why should I go there again?" "Why," said the woman, "you did catch him, and you let him go again. He is sure to do it. Go at once." The man still did not quite like to go, but did not want to oppose his wife, and went to the sea. When he got there, the sea was all green and yellow, and no longer smooth. He stood and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea. Come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, Dame Isabel, wills not I'd have her will. Then the flounder came swimming to him, and said, Well, what does she want then? Ah, said the man, I did catch you, and my wife says I really ought to have wished for something. She does not like to live in a wretched hovel any longer. She would like to have a cottage. Go then, said the flounder, she has it already. When the man got home, his wife was no longer in the hovel, but instead of it, there stood a small cottage, and she was sitting on a bench before the door. Then she took him by the hand and said to him, Just come inside. Look. Now isn't this a great better deal? So they went in, and there was a small porch, and a pretty little parlor, and a bedroom, and a kitchen, and pantry, with the best of furniture, and fitted up with the most beautiful things made of tin and brass, whatsoever was wanted. And behind the cottage there was a small yard, with hens and ducks, and a little garden with flowers and fruit. Look, said the wife, is not that nice? Yes, said the husband, and so we must always think it. Now we will live quite contented. We will think about it, said the wife. With that, they ate something and went to bed. Everything went well for a week or a fortnight, and then the woman said, Hark you, husband, this cottage is far too small for us, and the garden and yard are little. The flounder might as well have given us a larger house. I should like to live in a great stone castle. Go to the flounder and tell him to give us a castle. Ah, wife, said the man, the cottage is quite good enough. Why should we live in a castle? What? Said the woman. Go at once. The flounder can always do that. No, wife, said the man. The flounder has just given us a cottage. I do not like to go back so soon. It might make him angry. Go, said the woman. He can do it quite easily and will be glad to do it. Just you go to him. The man's heart grew heavy, and he did not wish to go. He said to himself, It is not right, and yet he went. And when he came to the sea, the water was quite purple, and dark blue and gray and thick, no longer green and yellow. But it was still quiet, and he stood there and said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, Dame Isabel, wills not as I'd have willed her. Well, what does she want now? Said the flounder. Alas, said the man, half scared, she wants to live in a great stone castle. Go to it, then. She is standing before the door, said the flounder. Then the man went home, and when he got there, he found a great stone palace, and his wife was just standing on the steps going in. She took him by the hand and said, Come in. So she went with her, and in the castle was a great hall paved with marble, and many servants, who flung wide the doors. The walls were all bright with beautiful hangings, and in the rooms were chairs and tables of pure gold. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and all the rooms and bedrooms had carpets. Food and wine of the very best were standing on all the tables, so that they nearly broke down beneath it. Behind the house, too, there was a great courtyard, with stables for horses and cows, and the very best of carriages. There was a magnificent large garden too, with the most beautiful flowers and fruit trees, and a park quite half a mile long, in which there were stags, deers, and hares, and everything that could be desired. "Come," said the woman, "isn't that beautiful?" "Yes, indeed," said the man. "Now let it be. We will live in this beautiful castle and be content." "We will consider about that," said the woman, "and sleep upon it." Thereupon they went to bed. Next morning the wife awoke first. It was just daybreak, and from her bed she saw the beautiful country lying before her. Her husband was still stretching himself, so she poked him in the side with her elbow and said, "Get up, husband, and just peep out of the window. Look, you, couldn't we be the king over all that land? Go to the flounder, and we will be the king." "Ah, wife," said the man, "why should we be king? I do not want to be king." "Well," said the wife, "if you won't be king, I will. Go to the flounder, for I will be king." "Ah, wife," said the man, "why do you want to be king? I do not like to say that to him." "Why not?" said the woman. "Go to him at once. I must be king." So the man went, and was quite unhappy because his wife wished to be king. "It is not right, it is not right," thought he. He did not wish to go, but yet he went. And when he came to the sea, it was quite dark gray. The water heaved up from below, and it smelt putrid. Then he went and stood by it and said, "Flounder, flounder, in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife Dame Isabel wills not as I'd have her will." "Well, what does she want now?" said the flounder. "Alas," said the man, "she wants to be king. Go to her, she is king already." So the man went. When he came to the palace, the castle had become much larger, and had a great tower and magnificent ornaments. The sentinel was standing before the door, and there were numbers of soldiers with kettle drums and trumpets. And when he went inside the house, everything was of real marble and gold, with velvet covers and great golden tassels. Then the doors of the halls were opened, and there was a court in all its splendor, and his wife was sitting on a high throne of gold and diamonds, with a great crown of gold on her head, and a scepter of pure gold and jewels in her hand. On both sides of her stood her maidens, waiting in a row, each of them always one head shorter than the last. Then he went and stood before her, and said, "Ah, wife, and now you are king." "Yes," said the woman, "now I am king." So he stood and looked at her, and when he had looked at her thus for some time, he said, "And now that you are king, let all else be. We will wish for nothing more." "Nay, husband," said the woman, quite anxiously, "I find time pass very heavily. I can bear it no longer. Go to the flounder. I am king, but I must be emperor too." "Alas, wife, why do you wish to be emperor?" "Husband," said she, "go to the flounder. I will be emperor." "Alas, wife," said the man, "he cannot make you emperor. I may not say that to the fish. There is only one emperor in the land. An emperor the flounder cannot make you. I assure you he cannot." "What?" said the woman. "I am the king, and you are nothing but my husband. Will you go this moment? Go at once. If he can make a king, he can make an emperor. I will be emperor. Go instantly." So he was forced to go, and the man went. However, he was troubled in mind and thought to himself, "It will not end well. It will not end well. Emperor is too shameless. The flounder will last be tired out." With that, he reached the sea. The sea was quite black and thick, and began to boil from below, so that it threw up bubbles, and such a sharp wind blew over that it curdled, and the man was afraid. Then he went and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife Dame Isabel wills not as I'd have her willed." "Well, what does she want now?" said the flounder. "Alas, flounder," said he, "my wife wants to be emperor." "Go to her," said the flounder, "she is emperor already." So the man went, and when he got there, the whole palace was made of polished marble, with alabaster figures and golden ornaments. And the soldiers were marching before the door, blowing trumpets, beating cymbals and drums. In the house, barons and counts and dukes were going about as servants. Then they opened the doors to him, which were of pure gold. And when he entered, there sat his wife on the throne, which was made of one piece of gold, and was quite 2 miles high. And she wore a great golden crown that was 3 yards high, and sat with diamonds and carbuncles. In one hand she held the scepter, and in the other the imperial orb. And both sides of her the yeomen of the guard, in 2 rows, each being smaller than the one before him, from the biggest giant, who was 2 miles high, to the very smallest dwarf, just as big as my little finger, and stood before a number of princes and dukes. Then the man said, "Wife, are you emperor now?" "Yes," said she, "now I am emperor." Then he stood and looked at her well, and when he had looked at her thus for some time, he said, "Wife, be content, now that you are the emperor." "Husband," said she, "why are you standing there? Now I am emperor, but I will be pope too. Go to the flounder." "Alas, wife," said the man, "what will you not wish for? You cannot be pope. There is but one Christendom. He cannot make you pope." "Husband," said she, "I will be pope. Go immediately. I must be pope this very day." "No, wife," said the man. "I do not like to say that to him. That would not do. This is too much. The flounder cannot make you pope." "Husband," said she, "what nonsense! If he can make an emperor, he can make a pope. Go to him directly. I am the emperor, and you are nothing but my husband. Will you go at once?" Then he was afraid and went, but he was quite faint and shivered and shook. His knees and legs trembled, and high wind blew over the land, and the clouds flew and tossing toward evening, all gray dark. And the leaves fell from the trees, and the water rose and roared as if it were boiling, splashed onto the shore. In the distance we saw ships which were firing guns in their sore need, pitching and tossing on the waves. And yet in the midst of the sky there was still a small bit of blue, though on every side it was as red as in a heavy storm. So full of despair he went and stood in much fear and said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea. Come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife Dame Isabel wills not as I'd have her will. Well, what does she want now? Said the flounder. Alas, said the man, she wants to be the Pope. Go to her then, said the flounder. She is Pope already. So he went, and when he got there, he saw what seemed to be a large church surrounded by palaces. He pushed his way through the crowd. Inside, however, everything was lighted with thousands and thousands of candles. And his wife was clad in gold, and she was sitting on a much higher throne, and had 3 great golden crowns on it. And round about her there was much churchly splendor, and on both sides of her was a row of candles, the largest of which was as tall as the very tallest tower, down to the very smallest kitchen candle. And all emperors and kings were on their knees before her, kissing her shoe. Wife, said the man, and looked attentively at her, are you Pope now? Yes, she said, I am Pope. But she stood and looked at her, and it was just as if he was looking at the bright sun. He stood looking at her thus for a short time. He said, Ah, wife, if you are Pope, do well let alone. But she looked as stiff as a post, and did not move or show any signs of life. Then he said, Wife, now that you are Pope, be satisfied. You cannot become anything greater. I will consider about that, said the woman. Thereupon they both went to bed, but she was not satisfied, and greediness let her have no sleep, for she was continually thinking, what was there left for her to be? The man slept well and soundly, for he had run about a great deal during the day. But the woman could not fall asleep at all, and she flung herself from one side to the other the whole night through, thinking what was more left for her to be, unable to call anything to mind. At length the sun began to rise, and when the woman saw the dawn of red, she sat up in her bed and looked at it. And when through the window she saw the sun thus rising, she said, Cannot I, too, order the sun and moon to rise? Husband, said she, poking him in the ribs with her elbow, wake up, go to the flounder, for I wish to be even as God is. The man was still half asleep, but he was so horrified he fell out of bed. He thought that must have been heard amiss, rubbed his eyes, and said, Alas, wife, what are you saying? Husband, said she, if I can't order the sun and moon to rise, and have to look on and see the sun and moon rising, I can't bear it. I shall not know what it is to have another happy hour, unless I can make them rise myself. Then she looked at him so terribly that a shudder ran over him, and said, Go at once. I wish to be like unto God. Alas, wife, said the man, falling on his knees before her, the flounder cannot do that. He can make an emperor and a pope. I beseech you, go on as you are and be pope. Then she fell into a rage, and her hair flew wildly about her head, and she cried, I will not endure this. I will not bear it any longer. Will you go? Then he put on his trousers and ran away like a madman. But outside a great storm was raging, and blowing so hard that he could scarcely keep up on his feet. Houses and trees toppled over, mountains trembled, rocks rolled into the sea. The sky was pitch black, and it thundered and lightened. And the sea came in with black waves as high as church towers and mountains, and all crests of white foam at the top. He cried. He could not bear to hear his own words. Flounder, flounder, in the sea, come, I pray thee, here to me, for my wife, Dame Isabel, wills not as I'd have her will. Well, what does she want now? Said the flounder. Alas, said he, she wants to be like unto God. Go to her, and you will find her back again in the dirty hovel. And there they are, living at this very time. The end. Now that this video is finished, turn off your phone, close your eyes, and just breathe in and out slowly until you fall asleep. See you in the next video.